Hello and welcome to the inaugural edition of Quarantine History of Ottertail County. I'm your host, Chris Schuelke. I'm the Executive Director of the Ottertail County Historical Society. Well, the museum has been closed for about over a week now, and while we're staying busy, I'm sorry, excuse me? Yes? What? Oh, my wife and technical support is telling me that I should probably not have a beer growler and a glass on the table while we're recording this. The honest fact is that I was going to pour myself a glass of beer, but discovered it was empty anyway. So we'll save that for later. You know, it's interesting that I was able to get this beer locally. In addition to liquor stores in just about every community of Ottertail County, there are 3 craft breweries, 2 in Fergus Falls and 1 in Perham. So, of course, I have to look at things from a historical perspective. And this reminded me that not only are we commemorating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which of course gave women the right to vote, it is also the 100th anniversary of the 18th Amendment that prohibited the sale and manufacture of all alcoholic beverages. Prohibition, as this time period lasted throughout the 1920s until finally being repealed in 1933. And while it certainly curtailed the manufacture and consumption of alcohol, people found a way to get a drink. Bootlegging was common throughout Ottertail County. Now let me give you an example. 101 West Main in Perham is a fine Italianate style building constructed in 1907. It has arched window hoods. I definitely highlighted on my tour of downtown Perham. But the building was ironically at one time a saloon, and then it became Gahn's store. Now Mike Gahn's was a druggist who sold liquor for purely medicinal purposes. And during Prohibition in the 1920s, a number of places in Perham sold illegal liquor. Now, of course, they were very coordinated. When they were tipped off the law was coming, store owners would hide their booze in places other than their store. Well, teenagers, of course, found out about the hiding places and would often steal the illegal liquor for themselves. Interesting. When he was not selling liquor, Mike Gahn's sold a treat of his own creation. It was ice cream on a stick, dipped into chocolate, and then frozen. So, some communities, Prohibition now lasted throughout the 1930s, and on March 22nd, 1933, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt finally repealed Prohibition, and he legalized the sale of beer and liquor, and that ended it. Now, this was welcome news for Perham, as was reported in the April 17th, 1933 Perham Enterprise Bulletin. That article said, "A checkup on the amount of beer consumed in Perham on the first 2 days of legalized beer revealed that 19,632 glasses of beer went down the throats of thirsty Perhamites in 48 hours. Reports are about that the brewers pulled a fast one and put less alcohol in the beer than the law allows in order to break the boys in easy and not cause any undue scenes." Now, some communities dealt with the repeal of Prohibition better than others. Perham, had kind of a reputation as a hard-drinking community, and so that was very welcome news. Fergus Falls, on the other hand, had a difficult time with the repeal of Prohibition. The issue of beer and liquor became a divisive issue in the community. Let me give you an example. On July 24th, 1934, Adriana Lerfeld pleaded guilty to selling beer without a license. Mrs. Lerfeld ran a small grocery store north of the old fairgrounds, which is currently where the football field is now. She told the judge that she could not make a living unless she sold beer, and that other beer dealers in town were jealous and wanted to make trouble for her. She also said that many of the people who had been seen drunk around her place had gotten their fill downtown only came to her store to get more beer. Well, it was this type of unseemly episode that prompted local attorney Philip Munson to run for mayor in 1936. When Mrs. Lerfeld's case came up, Mr. Munson said, "I sympathize with Mrs. Lerfeld. I know she is a widow and struggling to make ends meet, but I will not tolerate the sale of illegal beer. It has been happening far too often, and without strict enforcement will lead to moral decay. Much of this is the result of weak civic leadership. This is not the first time Mrs. Lerfeld has flaunted the law. When the circus came to town a few years back, the city raided her store and came away with 15 gallons and 200 quart bottles of beer. She was obviously expecting extra business from those carnival types." Philip Munson was a strict Methodist teetotaler who believed in the abolition of all alcoholic beverages. And by the mid-1930s, he was disturbed by the perceived weakening of community morals. Yes, Prohibition had been repealed. Yes, it was the midst of the Depression, and times were definitely tough. There were a number of transients in Fergus Falls, along with several beer parlors. And Philip Munson did not like that. He did not like what Fergus Falls was becoming, and he was determined to do something about it. So after he was elected mayor in 1936, he gave a speech to the Fergus Falls Rotary Club, and he laid out a series of steps he believed would benefit the community. When I was elected mayor, my mission was to clean up Fergus Falls. Not everyone agrees with my methods, but unlike other politicians, I did not take office to make friends. I do not claim the city is in moral decay, but there are conditions that can and must be remedied. First, there are far too many beer parlor signs on East Lincoln Avenue. These signs should be replaced with cafe signs instead. Second, there are too many dogs roaming about the city making a mess. I want a census of the canine population with the sex of each noted. License fees will be $1 for male dogs and $8 for females. We must also make sure the dog ordinance is enforced to control the population. Third, we will limit the hour of beer sales and make sure that all beer parlor interiors be arranged so that plain views of the interiors can be seen from the street. Fourth, there are known bootleggers in Fergus Falls, and I serve notice on them right now to get out of town and stay out. If necessary, I shall appoint extra police to trail them until they are unable to get around. The sale of hard liquor in Fergus Falls is illegal, and it's going to be stopped. There is no such thing as a good or bad drunk. Reaction to liquor indulgence differs. Some want to fight, others to sing, some go to sleep. The bottom line is the police will be instructed to arrest all those who are drunk. Now, Philip Munson's crusade to clean up Fergus Falls had a lasting impact. While a few places continued to sell beer, if you wanted a stiff drink, you had to go outside of town. On vacation last week, I spent a few days in Fergus Falls. I'll bet it is the largest city in the state that has no legal over-the-bar booze. Driving down Lincoln Avenue, I noticed only 2 places where 3.2 beer was sold. There are no bars where hard liquor is sold, but in Foxholm, a village of less than 112 miles away, there is an elegant booze dispensary entirely supported and fattened by Fergus Falls patrons. Now, Fergus Falls is a fine and beautiful city, and maybe the absence of bars is worth to them whatever they lose in taxes and license fees. Now, those are the observations of a man named Richard Farrington, who was a reporter at the Stillwater Post-Messenger, and he made those comments in September 1948, a full 15 years after Prohibition ended. Now, after Prohibition, communities had the option to have hard liquor or not. Fergus Falls was one of those communities that chose not to. And it was an extremely, as I mentioned before, divisive issue in the community. Also, a big issue was whether or not to have a municipal liquor store. Now, they were obviously losing out on a lot of earned income, and which became a point of contention. So whether or not to open a municipal liquor store divided Fergus Falls for years. Proposals were defeated in 1951 and again in 1957. And a third vote was held in the spring of 1959. And despite fierce opposition from Fergus Falls clergy, a liquor store was finally approved in a municipal vote. The first store opened on Vine Street, across from what is now Service Food, before a larger store opened in November 1960 in the old Creamery building, which was located in the parking lot behind what is now the Viking Cafe. Conveniently, the police station was also located in the same building. Now, of course, Fergus Falls has 2 municipal liquor stores, certainly contributing to the income of our community. So I want everyone to be safe during the great quarantine. Social distancing, folks. The museum will be open when the state allows us to. Look for more quarantine history of Ottertail County right here with your host, Chris Schuelke. Thank you for joining me. Stay safe.